Welcome back to the Blink podcast on what is a pretty quiet Friday morning here in London, surprisingly so. And we're joined today by Ed, and I'm going to let Ed introduce himself in just a second. Though I do have to share, he was telling Georgie and I quite an amusing story in the green room just a moment ago, in that he'd been listening, him and his boss had listened to the podcast, and on episode 1, Georgie talked about the fact that we were going to have some weird and wonderful people joining us this series, which was met by a slew of laughing face emojis from Ed's boss when she realised that he was in fact one of those people. For the tape, I would like to say that I did correct Georgie and say we'd be having mostly wonderful people.
Why is being weird a bad thing?
It's not. Okay. It's just an amusing thing, I think.
Well, I mean, the joke's on you guys, because I'm just going to be boring, staid, monotone.
Great.
Except, obviously, I'm not.
Yes.
Because what we'll do is quiet vibe here today at Blink HQ, but we're going to liven things up over the next 45 minutes or however long we end up chatting for.
In fact, I challenge you both to dial up the weird today, right?
Absolutely.
I'm here for it. Absolutely.
There we go. That's I don't know how I'm going to top that, but give me a moment.
So I will give you a moment, Ed, because I wanted to sort of set the table. In the early part of this series, we've been talking about how do we get leaders involved in employee engagement, employee experience. We've been talking a lot about how we can get employees involved as well. The third part of the stool that we haven't touched on so much, and one of the reasons why I'm really excited to chat to you today is where things start to get maybe a bit too much, challenges and issues of moderation and what we can do from an internal comms perspective to make sure that things don't get out of control. I know we'll touch a little bit on those first two topics as well, but when Georgie and I first met with you, I think that was one of the areas that you've got some pretty clear views on, and I think the listeners will be quite keen to learn from you on that topic too.
Yep.
But for now, welcome to the show. Do you want to start by maybe giving everyone a little bit more of an insight into who Ed is and what you're up to?
Well, first of all, thank you, Peter, Georgie, for having me, welcoming me this morning to Blink HQ. So, who is Ed Thomas? I'm a professional communicator, and I make a difference to people's lives, which is kind of my way of living the brand of the organisation I work for. More about me. So I lead communications function at a housing association, and we deliver all kinds of services, frontline services. About 70% of our people are delivering frontline services, plumbers, electricians, but also people delivering what we call skin-on-skin care to generally older people, but also adults with learning disabilities and things like that. So a purpose-driven organisation, which is something that's really important to me. So a little bit about my journey in comms. I am a kind of unashamed generalist.
Wearing many hats.
Yep. Sometimes those hats might not suit me. Sometimes I think they suit me.
Yeah, you try and pull them
I feel
off.
like we should have some props.
Cue the hats.
Because that definitely could dial up the weird quite quickly. And so I think that, I guess I'm a specialist generalist.
Yep.
I guess that's what I really like. So
that's a new term. I like it.
We'll get on to this a little bit about where internal comms kind of fits within all of that.
Yeah, and I feel, Ed, you're here today because we sort of, asked around in the organisation. We want somebody a bit different, maybe in an industry that isn't traditionally all things crazy, social, employee-driven approach to comms, and your name came up. And again, thank you so much for joining us. But just to set the tone today in terms of the lens in which we're going to be having the conversation through, tell me a little bit about your philosophy around internal comms and this culture building element, because I know you feel very strongly about it being more modern, social, and employee-driven.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely. So I think what my philosophy really boils down to is I want to give a bit more control than maybe even I'm comfortable with. It all boils down to, for me, the key word is trust. Trust your people. Let the shackles off and see what happens. And if you're at a point where you could do that, it will be really scary. But take a deep breath.
I can hear sharp intakes of breath already.
Trust your people. Actually, people understand they're at work, even if it's engaging through an app, a digital platform of some kind.
Yeah.
People, they're generally grown-ups, and how people engage.
Yeah.
It's not that often in workplaces people have stand-up abusive arguments.
Yeah.
That maybe they do happen in some places, and they get dealt with. Just because it's online doesn't mean it's any more likely to happen, really. And if it does, it just gets dealt with in the same way.
Yeah, and arguably that's never necessarily a bad thing. It means those voices are heard that maybe traditionally wouldn't be, right? So
airing grievances is really important. Asking challenging questions is really important.
Yeah.
Providing a venue, a space for people to do that is really important.
Yeah.
So a more traditional button-down approach where it's like, we don't do comment. We don't want people to comment. So that doesn't mean people aren't thinking the challenging things, and it just means you're not hearing it.
Yes.
So actually, by getting it all out in the open, it's much easier to address.
And I love this philosophy, and I hope this carries on throughout the episode in terms of it needs to come from that place of trust. We spoke about do we assume trust from the start, or do we have to build and earn trust? But on that,
trust from
day one.
Day one, yeah.
But guys, before we get into the good stuff, we do need to do a bit of forced fun.
Yeah.
Oh heck.
Peter his eyes roll out of his head.
Where are the pens?
Just take a deep breath.
There's always something, Ed.
So I'm hopeful for this forced fun section, you put all of your hats on.
Okay.
Because I've got some quick fire questions, but I genuinely mean quick fire.
Just for Ed?
Do you want to get involved?
No, I don't. I'll sit back and relax if these are...
Yeah, I'm going to say just Fred, and then you might be allowed the odd phrase, but where possible, just dive in with a one or two worder, okay?
With all of that right hook.
I'll try not to resort to physical violence.
Great. I feel we're at least arm's length away, so it might be okay.
I'm sure, yeah.
Okay, so quick fire rounds, and we're going to get into our heated chit chat for the day. So, are you ready? Most overrated internal comms buzzword.
So, right, it's not going to be a word. It's going to be more of a theme
phrase
or something like that. and actually, I think it relates back to what we've just talked about, and it's to do with that buttoning down or unbuttoning. That's maybe not the best thing to do in a workplace, is to start unbuttoning things, but I've gone down that route now.
So we've committed. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you. Buzz theme. Email or video, which gets better cut through?
So video content is generally more engaging, but you do need to use video to deliver messages. So video, but sometimes delivering it by email is really helpful.
Nice. Employee app or traditional intranet?
App.
One thing you'd ban from internal comms forever?
So I think that this is about I would do what internal comms needs to be is my vision. Which of course is complete nonsense because it's got nothing to do with necessarily my vision.
One person.
But it's to do with that whole organisation conversation. But so it's not necessarily something I'd ban, but something I would encourage forever is providing a space where people can get on and have that conversation, exchange the information they need to, engage socially, and do all the things that your organisation needs its people to do.
Sharing the hats.
sharing the hats around.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I am actually really going to lean into the hat theme just throughout the episode.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly, what's your comms superpower?
Dyslexia.
Really?
Yeah.
Come on.
Incredible, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get into that in terms of some of
Cool.
these
We can
examples
do
you've
that.
got.
I got to do a quick shout out, I think, for my brother at this point, who would appreciate that answer. He does a neurodiversity podcast at Just Eat, and you can find him at, I put the sexy in dyslexia. So thanks for that answer, Ed.
Yeah.
Strong
There we go.
Instagram handle for sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ed, it's already taken.
Just to build, just to build on that a bit. I think that's actually. I think there's probably quite a lot in that in terms of how that builds my philosophy. So, getting so obsessed with, literally the spelling. Well, the spelling's important, although the odd spelling mistake sometimes boosts engagement, particularly maybe in a more kind of marketing kind of way. But it doesn't have to be perfect to be great. And we could
The perfect polish.
Let's get someone else to proofread it. Let's get someone else to proofread it. Is the key message there?
Yes.
Do people understand it?
Yes.
Share it.
Yeah. We talk a lot about things traditionally being very polished, and we've really made this shift for, to being a bit more human. And sometimes that isn't the most polished approach to things.
But what that means is it's authentic. And authenticity is key.
Yeah.
So for internal comms, but actually I think I would argue for kind of any comms, you can over polish your content, and it almost makes it unattainable. So if you're using a social platform for your internal comms, if your corporate announcements and things are Hollywood blockbuster, full HD, is that going to encourage more people? Because we could do that, but actually we're kind of much better using photos as using our phone, sharing it straight away, rather than rocking up with the film crew and lighting and all the rest of it. Because what I want to do is make corporate announcements and those things that we do need. There is information that we need to share, of course there is, but I also want to provide or set out an environment where people can share their own content, because actually their content's better than our content, certainly more interesting. And they don't have the luxury of being able to
the lighting and production.
Exactly. So I want to encourage people just to take a selfie, share it.
For sure.
Because that's where the story is.
Yeah, and also
that's what people find more interesting,
that's
in my humble opinion.
Where life has come from a social perspective anyway. Instagram used to be this perfect social media platform and everything, let me get my perfect eggs, avocado, let me photograph it like this, whereas...
Are you hungry?
I actually haven't had breakfast, so maybe that's why. Just coffee. But I think, now if you think what Instagram is and TikTok, it's much more real human type content. It's not this perfect polish, and that's what people are seeing on a daily basis. So if you then come to work, you see this really polished, perfect, overproduced content. It's quite jarring. So it sounds like you've got a really good sort of approach of mirroring that feeling from social media, and maybe what a lot of people are seeing anyway.
And I think it's. I think we need to. I'm saying I think quite a lot here, aren't I? But,
just say I know.
But
with my hat on.
What I know is that we could gear our internal comms up, so we do big set piece things on a kind of every week we do this and every month we do this, but actually it's constant conversation. So, and not every organisation has the resource and ability to polish everything to within an inch of its life.
Yeah.
So actually just being able to rock up with your phone and film it, take a photo, and actually then just post it. It doesn't need to go back through editing and all the rest of it. There is absolutely a time and a place for that, but with your constant churn of what we want to be talking about, maybe you can, but
is it realistic?
I would choose not to.
Yeah, no, I love it. And Ed, I want to know a little bit about, I guess, your comms team. I know we've touched a little bit on internal comms isn't just down to one person, but you're head of communications.
Yeah.
How big is your team? How have you structured the team?
So we're 8 people. I'm really lucky for the comms people out there who are in kind of
team of one.
Team of one. Kudos to you. I'm not quite sure how you do it, but really well done. And I've worked in smaller organisations where I've kind of been like the comms person, but actually the comms person that also does several other things, kind of at that scale of organisation. But anyway, we're 8 people. No one has internal
Comms
the word internal at all in their job title.
Okay.
So
why is that?
So because I want everyone to own it. So instead, how we structure things is everyone in the team will have different parts of the organisation they work with, in a kind of like a business partner kind of model. And so if we're talking to the people in our property team or in our care team about what they're up to, announcements they need to make, great stories, whoever it is in my team will then they will pick things up, create that content, package everything up to be shared internally, externally to 3 key audiences: our people, all of our staff, our customers, and then our stakeholders, partners, people that we're working with, kind of locally, nationally, are really important. So what I don't want is to take one story, if you like, and then have
different channel.
Because we're going to end up telling slightly different stories. And of course, you do need to tweak things up potentially for different stories. But actually, do you? I'm not really sure you do. An announcement's an announcement, sharing the news. And I would say it's probably more important to tell the right audiences in the right order than it is to, our customers need to find out about this. It's a different message for them. It's like,
or a different experience then, isn't it? Well, if customers need this experience, employees need that experience. And I know we were just having a chat.
But I think do you get the experience through the channel you engage on?
Yes.
I would suggest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel your philosophy, Peter, very much is around focusing with your people, and naturally that will, radiate to naturally a great customer experience.
Exactly. We were talking about this with Riley at the White Company on the last episode, like how actually how wonderful and fantastic it can be when like the tone of voice and the way that you're interacting with customers is actually the same as the way that you're trying to interact with employees, because you don't need to remember who you're talking to. You just need to be talking in the same type of way, especially when you're creating like a great customer experience, and that becomes a competitive differentiator. Like if you can use that same, I suppose, exactly internally, then there's a lot of benefits to be reaped there as well.
Happy people, happy customers.
Yeah, totally.
So, and it's got to be that order. Yeah, I think for me it's got to be that order. And that's why the internal audience needs to be at the same level as your customers.
Yeah.
You just needs to be. If we just say this person in the team does internal, and then the rest of us will get on with customers, it's like, well,
there's no cohesion necessarily,
and that will work for a lot of organisations. Just not how I would.
Yeah, it depends on the size and scale of and type of workforce. And with that in mind, I guess the first thing I want to dive into is in a housing association. Please judge me in this situation, but I thought, or maybe you'd have a very traditional approach to comms and maybe be very sort of, I think you used the term, Ed, command and control, and maybe that was the ethos of how communication was run off a sort of more standard intranet platform.
Yeah.
And I just want to learn a little bit about your vision, how it's significantly shifted, maybe in an industry that's had more of that traditional approach to comms, and how have you managed that shift, and how did that even come about?
Yeah, so housing associations are not public sector, but we're kind of pseudo public sector. A lot of housing associations are spin-off is the wrong phrase. The housing stock itself was kind of spun out of councils, local authorities. Loads of this happened kind of 20, 25 years ago. And and that ethos, a lot of the people are just, still the same. So the ethos and things has absolutely changed, and has stayed the same. There has absolutely been a shift, I think generally, but over the last 5-ish years. And it also just happens to be that I came into post kind of 6.5 years ago. My predecessor was a lovely lady, but she was someone who was a housing person that did comms, whereas I'm a comms person that does housing. I think the other thing to throw into the mix here is generally how the public consume their information has totally changed.
Wildly different, right? Yeah.
I was reading a post yesterday from a really good friend of mine who runs an agency, and he was celebrating a milestone. I think it was 15 years of the agency or something, and just thinking about
like a comms marketing agency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, 15 years ago, it was all about kind of press, PR, TV, whereas now, and yes, that, but also in social basically didn't exist.
Yeah.
So the whole world has totally changed, and so from my perspective, it was about kind of seizing that, and it's like, people want more authentic engagement, so we can just stick an announcement on the intranet. Everyone knows now. No, they don't.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is think about how we deliver those messages, how we make kind of bite-sized information. I think is really important. The visuals that you put around it, because in a information-rich world, I think we're slightly naive to think as soon as people get to work, they are not consuming other information.
Yeah.
People are picking up their phone. They are scrolling through their kind of personal socials. They're looking at, they get their news app alerts and bits and pieces during the day. So your internal comms platforms are also
You're
competing
in competition
with that.
with those.
You
Right,
are.
yeah.
So you've got to make your information engaging. And I see that as a really exciting creative challenge to kind of compete with all of that.
Yeah.
And can I just come in on this one, Ed? So like the timeline of this is quite interesting to me. So, you're talking about the sort of big change that happened in the way that housing associations operate going back sort of 20, 25 years now.
Yeah.
You yourself having been in the post for 6.5 years, you say?
Yeah.
But what struck me from listening to you so far is that there are some pretty clear belief systems that govern the type of communicator that you are and the team that you've built. We talked earlier about it doesn't have to be perfect to be great, which touches on these kind of opportunities for employee-generated content and authenticity. And obviously, we've talked about this idea or this belief system of we assume trust. That's who we are, and that is a framework for lots of other decisions that we make downstream. That's real strategic clarity about the type of communications team and ethos that you have. And I'm just trying to sort of understand whether that's always been there, whether that came in when you started, whether that's something that you've had to build up over time. We know that's where you are now, but how did you get there?
Tell us about the journey, Ed.
I mean, I was starting to get a few flashbacks, and if I start shivering or cowering in the corner, I apologise in advance. I mean,
so it's been quite the journey.
It has definitely been a journey. We've been on a journey. I think that it's also not linear. So it hasn't just kind of a nice smooth upward curve towards internal communication utopia, which we will get to one day. But I mean, there's no way we're there right now. To get back to the actual question, I arrived in post with an established team, with talented people, but I was slightly constrained by a more traditional mindset. And what we had to do was work over a period of time to, I think, unleash a bit of creativity.
Tease it out.
So even before I came into post, I approved ordering 2,000 pairs of sunglasses. And I think that's quite a good metaphor.
And hats or just glasses?
No, not hats.
Okay.
We've done hats more recently.
Okay.
Some nice green beanie hats.
Thank you for clarifying, because I could see Georgie itching to ask what type
Like,
of
what
hat.
kind of hat? Glad it was green. Very on brand for us as well.
And if I can find a hat, if we've still got one, here we are. First day of spring, I will send you a woolly beanie hat.
Okay,
if I can find one.
Definitely hold you to that.
What the hell were we talking
You ordered
about?
2,000 sunglasses before you even started.
Yeah, so I think it's like, let's dial this up a bit.
Okay.
Think a bit more creatively. What's going to engage our people and it's our people, but I mean, actually, that was probably more of an external thing. Although actually, most of those sunglasses didn't make it to customers because staff loved them.
Yeah.
Different, something new, and I think that just created this sense of this could end up like being a little bit different. Maybe we're going to kind of change things up from how we've done things in the past. I think that there's then a few kind of key moments and opportunities for changing use of technology. So I'd been in post about 18 months when we went into lockdown. 5 weeks before we went into lockdown, there'd been changes in our executive team. I'd a new boss. Part of her remit was very much around kind of change, transformation, use of technology, and all the rest of it. We went into lockdown, and a whole load of technological change was rolled out in about 3 days.
Go.
Yeah. And we jumped on that as an opportunity to think about. Now there's an opportunity to bring different solutions in that would boost our ability to socially engage, and so that there was a bit of a kind of a change window there, aligned to the fact that everyone was like stuck in their houses. I say everyone, 3/4 of our people were not stuck in their houses. They were delivering.
Not desk-based.
But they were like, they might have popped into the office to do something. Yep. They now weren't doing that. So our trades were like getting in their van, going to people's homes where they had to ask customers to go into a different room, and all of this stuff. So they were lone working, but even more lone working than they were before. Let's think about it. It was just a bit of an alien world, wasn't it?
Of course.
So, but what that so people were asking, we need more social kind of engagement, and
so there was an appetite, right? From
there was. So we it was that,
which is a good starting point.
What was so it was replace the water cooler moment, or those opportunities for conversations with your colleagues about what did you watch on telly last night, what did you get up to at the weekend. So we need a way where we can allow people to do
those
this
moments.
Exactly. And it's a digital platform, and that means we can share the messages that we need to share and do that corporate stuff, but in a way that encourages a conversation, but also allow our people to share
and connect
their own stories and connect.
Yeah.
So yes, there's loads of conversation that we actively encourage around, the work stuff, but there's also groups of people who are, cats, dogs, sport, gardening, reading, loads of interest groups as well, which flourish.
It's how you find common ground and build relationships.
Yeah, and I want to talk a bit about this topic of sort of moderation, but before we kind of get into that, this belief system of assuming trust.
Yeah.
Where and how did that come in? Because I think that is a huge cultural backdrop that informs some of the decisions you make about how to engage on platforms and generally in the workplace. Is that something that you and the comms team championed? Is that a broader kind of leadership ethos? Like, I think there'd be people listening to this that think, I'd love to be able to assume trust, but I don't know how or where to start.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about
that. So I think where that really starts is I think I want people to trust me, but I do know that you need to work on that a bit, and you can't always just assume that people trust you. So it's about creating a culture within the team where
Nice.
we will deliver. You can trust us to get it done. We're going to look after it. Don't worry, we've got this covered.
Yeah.
And I think that enables communications more generally to be treated as a real kind of asset as a corporate function, if you like, rather than a kind of at the end, we better comms that.
Yeah, put it through.
Whereas
the
actually, if
team.
we can be included right from the beginning, part of the decision making, part of building your culture and doing all of that stuff, because it enables everything else.
Yes.
So if we can be trusted to that builds, and then and ultimately I think it kind of ink spots.
Yes.
So I start from, if I want people to trust me, I just need to trust them. So
I'm getting like Obama speech vibes about if we can change a room, we can change a town. If we can change a town, we can change a state. And but I agree. It's kind of like I'm asking you, how do you get from an organizational perspective to this state where you assume that the trust of your employees, to engage in a certain way? And what I'm hearing you say is, first we have to earn their trust, and we have to assume that they will trust us.
Yeah.
And that starts by me, Ed, individually, and our comms team individually living out a set of values each day, which creates that sense of trust.
Yeah.
And I think it's about, so what can we control? So we deliver those more formal corporate communications, and we try and do that in as open and transparent way as possible. I think if you do that, it generates trust and kind of honesty. So if your people can see that, they'll give it back as well.
Yeah, not trying to read behind, between the lines.
Exactly, because if we just do kind of, if you've just got a kind of an intranet where you just put a written statement on, it's got
minimal context.
No one's face next to it or their name. It's just like the organisation says this. Like, okay, so you've delivered the message.
But also how can I connect with that message and that sentiment?
Yeah. So I mean, I think sometimes a bit of mystery is maybe quite interesting or even fun thing.
Yeah.
But that probably depends a little bit on
the message.
What you're communicating.
Yeah.
So we're doing some work at the moment where for everything I do to champion kind of online communities to engage staff, we're actually going to bring everyone together as well, put everyone in kind of in a room together, not all 2,000 people, but we're going to do it over 2 days. So there'll be 1,000 people roughly in the room.
Amazing.
So actually, as we start communicating that, something like that right at the beginning, we could be quite anonymous and mysterious. Build up, anticipate, and that. But that's part of a campaign, and then you would introduce faces and people into sharing a bit more information.
Building a bit of hype.
Yeah.
And somebody once said to me when we, was trying to get into this conversation about trust and having that as a common ground for everybody in terms of their attitudes. And they said, you always have to go into relationships with always assume positive intent.
Yeah.
Because I think this is what happens, is that you start to have whether it's like stereotypes or a bit of past experience, thinking, why is this person asking me this? Why are they sending it this way? Whereas if you go into those interactions, those relationships, or reading communications with always assume positive intent. It's like when I was saying earlier, obviously when you work in marketing, people have a lot of opinions. It's very easy to be like, Whereas I think they care about the brand.
Yeah.
That's why they're asking me these questions, or that's why they're giving their opinion on the colour on the website, and it completely changes my interaction with that person. I'm like, they're actually assuming it wasn't Peter, even though I'm classic.
I'm symbolising everyone who's ever talking to you about anything right now.
Do you know what I mean?
I do,
completely changed my mindset, and it really changed the relationship that I had with people, and I think that just naturally breeds better relationships, therefore a trusting organisation if people are going into interactions, whether that's one-on-one, whether that's through communications, whether that's through a social platform, is always assume positive intent. It changed my outlook on how I dealt with other people as well.
I'm with you, and then we got to look at I think what Ed's talking about is like the levers for ensuring that people do assume positive intent. Because I'm rabbiting on a lot about trust at the moment at the top line. Let's just sort of take that down into the weeds of how this stuff manifests itself. Like lots of people listening to this that we work with often are always very cautious about opening up platforms like this, and will question and challenge us of concerns around moderation and censorship and so on and so forth. Yeah. And of course, this is not an issue that's specific to internal comms. This is a world issue,
for sure.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You think about where the fear comes from, right? Because they've seen
they've seen what's happening on X and Twitter and all the rest of it, and these issues of sort of censorship versus free speech, they pervade our personal lives. So that's the first thing to say, but. I think that when we're thinking about these topics within the workplace and how to approach them, I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned. And, I really appreciate what you're saying, which is that if you can get yourself to a stage where you do operate on a assumptive trust basis, and we'll talk about how you might get there in a second as we have been, but that employees mirror that, where they do start to see things being deleted without any context, or where they're not able to participate in a conversation, or where that kind of social contract around trust is clearly not there, their behavior starts to match that.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's no silver bullet to this, but if you can get yourself to a place where you are assuming trust from the get-go, you're laying some pretty strong foundations. And I really appreciate where you're taking the conversation, which is, the best way to encourage trust or start from this assumptive trust is to begin with it in your team yourself. Exactly that. Yeah, spot on.
And Ed, when we were talking about, your approach and philosophy, you said, to be honest, Georgie, when we started this approach, we just opened the floodgates.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
As in, for me, it was an excited position, but I can imagine people thinking, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Give a little bit more control than perhaps you
were, even yourself,
you would be comfortable.
You were comfortable with.
And I'm quite up for just whatever. And so, of course, when we did this, it's like, well, I think people think about an internal digital engagement platform, an internal social enterprise. And what's the an enterprise social network is kind of what. It's not really a phrase used anymore. I'm deciding to use it today.
We'll bring it back,
but let's bring it back. And that was just going to be exactly the same as social media.
Yeah.
And of course, how it looks when you open the app, it's very similar, but it is different because it's at work rather than on social media. But the assumption is because it sort of kind of all looks the same, that people will behave the same. And of course, you do get that, keyboard warriors do exist. And, Peter's just talked about what happens in those, on some of those platforms. And, it's not always the nicest place to be. But actually, people understand when they're at work. And, like I said earlier, that people are generally grown-ups, and so just allow them to be grown-ups. And actually they'll self-moderate and self-police.
Interesting.
So when we launched, it was
so you opened the floodgates. Anyone could
post anywhere, comment on anything, create their own groups.
Chat to anyone.
Just anything.
Yeah.
Now, what we learn
I
is
was gonna
that
say,
creates
what were your surprises?
a lot of noise, and all of it adding value in its own way. But we were getting feedback from some people saying too much noise. Can you kind of help? And some of that's like, well, if you just tweak a couple of notifications, which you are in control, we trust you to be in control of your notifications.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I thought you did that for me. No, this is, but we're allowing people to create their own experience. And if people just want the corporate messages, and I don't want to know about any of that more social stuff that I talked about.
That Ed's got a puppy.
Work is work.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to talk about or listen to what people think about last weekend's football results. So we had to do a bit of educate. It's like, well, just leave those, or don't join. If you join those groups in the excitement of joining, just leave them. It's not really a problem. Just stay in this one, and that's where you'll get, the key announcements. So it's trusting people to create their own experience as well.
So you open the floodgates.
Yeah.
Your only surprise was just purely the amount of noise, which I could actually argue is a good thing because it just shows the level of appetite for wanting to get involved. But arguably it was too much noise. So what did you start to do? And I know you've had some good examples. Like I think you were saying there was almost too many examples of the same thing, but maybe in different regions, which was lovely. Yeah. Can you tell me about some of those examples? And then what you did?
So we had a few key people and also people in kind of specific roles. So we, as an organisation, we have about, so we're in the middle of some quite big change at the moment. Well over 50 retirement living schemes, retirement villages, these things.
Okay.
They have activity coordinators. So there is armchair aerobics going on every day somewhere. And if it's not today, they're playing bingo.
Sure.
Or they're having...
This isn't a metaphor, by the way. These aren't keyboard warriors. This is legit armchair aerobics.
This is legit armchair aerobics. There is a video of our chief exec doing some armchair aerobics. It may or may not appear on our external socials.
I was going to say, it sounds like good content.
But brilliant content.
But there was too much of it? Or?
So what you were getting is brilliant, wholesome content of staff working with customers to make a difference to their lives.
Yeah.
So happy, smiley people.
Which is what you're all about.
But it's essentially the same story every day.
I see.
Maybe in a different place. So we're in Telford, we're in Shrewsbury. But it's essentially the same thing. And then they do the same thing the following week. All fantastic. So what we had to do is, instead of just having loads of noise
in one place,
is figure out, well, which music would you like to listen to? So actually there was then a bit of, we open the floodgates. It's now we need to kind of control the flow a little bit. So and I'm kind of putting myself in the shoes of someone who manages a hydroelectric dam now, which is maybe a slightly bizarre place to go to.
Another hat, which will you wear?
Another hat, which I wear, maybe I don't know. But so if you want to listen to, rock music and have everything really loud, just keep everything on. If you want, a more relaxed vibe, then
head on over here.
Join this group, but leave that one.
Yeah.
If you want whatever else it is, then you can, again, it's bespoke. And a bit of that was like, right, well, in this group, what we need to do is we're going to allow anyone to post, but we're going to approve it. So, or actually in this group, we're just going to lock that down because that's about messages, and it's generally going to be the exec team and a few other people who are going to post there.
Right.
And so there was then a bit of, we have tweaked things over time.
Yeah,
so the floodgate is open. We're we've just moderated the flow.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. It's not that you've shut the noise down. It's just you've got lots of, streams and...
Yeah, but also I think one of the things
we
that
haven't
people...
just dammed the river.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I would surmise the big thing that leaders would worry about when you do have the floodgates open is people misbehaving rather than, having too much noise and so on. So it's kind of a high quality problem like Georgie was alluding to. But what about when people do misbehave? Or let me ask you a better question. If you were going to another business now and you said, look, I introduced this enterprise social platform in another business, I'd like to do the same here. And the CEO said to you, that's all fine, Ed, but I'm really pretty worried in our organization that if you were to do that, then there'd be effing and blinding and there'd be inappropriate behavior. What would you say to her?
So I think it would be important to finish this conversation before I join the organisation, because if actually it was never going to happen, I probably don't want to work there.
Good answer, yeah, nice.
So ultimately, I think that's a role for a kind of strategic communications advisor. It's like you and again, I would be having a conversation around trust, and we need to be seen to trust our people. Otherwise, they're not going to perform at their best. They're not going to have the best output. Happy people, happy customers. I think all of that starts with just let people be grown-ups, trust them to get on with things. And I think, what I now have the benefit of. Here's a kind of ready-made experience I can bring that with
a good use case.
I've helped I've introduced this. We've run it for 5 years. As we stand now, I think we've had 3. So there is a way where people can kind of report content in the way that you can do on kind of external platforms as well. I think we've had like 3 or 4 over the 5 years in or something like that.
Incredible.
One of them was someone reporting it so they could find out what happened.
Okay.
Which is a good test for our
report
systems.
For a report.
A bit like a fire alarm.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my god, someone's done this.
Help.
What do we do now? And then
works.
it's like, I just want anyway. And then
to
another
have.
one, and then you got a couple of things which were, I think entirely kind of fair enough. So. There was a photo of a candle that was very close to a laptop. There was also a laptop in proximity to a paddling pool.
Okay, interesting.
So these are good solid, IT
well-being,
like
health and safety.
should we have people putting cake and candles, happy birthday to that person about 4 years ago. But should they have it right on top of their laptop? I mean, first of all, you're going to get loads of crumbs in there. That's no one really wants that.
Oh hell!
But when they're not reporting, effing and jeffing.
Yes.
I really want to swear. But I don't know if I'm allowed to.
I appreciate the effing and jeffing.
I really want to. That sound quite aggressive. Sorry.
I thought we were having a good time.
Maybe. And now I'm trying desperately to figure out how can I swear but I can't think of how to work it into a sentence. Anyway, just because I want to know what sound effect you're going to use in the final edit.
I'm looking to an S for creativity.
They're not reporting racist, misogynistic content because it's not there. Because people, because we're really lucky that that's the organisation that we work in. People don't bring that to work.
Well, you make your own luck, and it sounds like you created this high trust environment that's an embodiment of. And I'm going to push the envelope a bit here further, just because I kind of just indulge this, right? So I appreciate your answer. You've had a chat with this CEO before you've taken this next job. You've sort of got this vision lock about a high trust environment that she supports and they want to build. You have launched something 12 months later, but actually, there are a few instances where people aren't saying the right thing. They're publicly saying things like, I don't know, why are we introducing this new benefits platform? I haven't had a pay rise in the last 12 months.
Yeah. Where's my pay? Where's my bonus?
Yeah, and I've got some thoughts here, and this is something that we think pretty deeply about. But I'm interested to kind of get your reaction. Let's say you're leading internal comms, you get something like that visibly popping up. What's going through your mind? What's the kind of framework or principles that you think about in order to respond to something like that?
So I think there's got to be a few things that come into play here. And I think the first thing to do is you get 1 or 2 comments. You don't need to necessarily, you need to address them, but you don't need to knee jerk, oh my God, we need to
reevaluate this platform.
Crisis exec meeting because we just need to announce a pay rise because everyone's about to go on strike.
Yeah.
You've had 1 or 2 comments. So, there's a few things that need to go on here. It's first of all, who are those people? What team are they in? Are they in the middle of,
something else?
What's going on? A big change? Are they restructuring? There's loads, have they got even personal stuff that, I don't necessarily want or need to know all of that stuff, but what is going on for them right now that means
what's the context?
They might be a bit more tetchy than they normally are because people are human and, with all the best will in the world, we don't want stressed out people at work, but when sometimes that happens, doesn't it? So I think it's understanding the context first and foremost, no kind of instant knee-jerk reaction. I think it's then about a really grown-up response to, so once you've figured out, is this 1 or 2 people sharing this, or is this a widely held view? And if we're talking about, most people would quite like a pay rise, let's face it, everyone.
Sure, who's going to say no?
Everyone in this room is overworked and underpaid. And everyone watching it is probably in the same boat. If this is an organisation where we have not addressed any of this for years, we probably do need to kind of have a bit of a think about that. But that's also not an instant, let's just do this and announce it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's then about a grown-up conversation about, we're listening, we've heard it, we're going to address it.
Yeah.
And it's about an adult conversation. So whatever those issues are, so this is and you set out a roadmap, and as long as you hit that roadmap, again, it's about building trust. So
and keeping people updated, because even if you can't address it immediately, it's like you just said, we hear you.
Yeah.
And
I think, what's really struck me about what you've said is, doing some discovery around what's circumstantially surrounding that individual. Georgie talked about context. We've talked a lot on the show about empathy. And I think you're right. That's the first thing here, right? Is trying to have some empathy for the individuals, in brackets, who have expressed this sentiment, because it helps you to determine, in my mind, whether, metaphorically speaking, they want a solution or a hug. There are lots of reasons why. And, this is again, in your personal life, right? Sometimes you'll go home and your partner will be complaining or talking about something that's happened in their day. And, I think a lot of us make this mistake of thinking oh my God, I've got to fix this. I need to give a solution to this, and I don't know what to do about this. And this isn't my area, but actually we're human, and it's not about just trying to find a solution. It's about trying to empathize with that person and make them appreciate that actually you see them and you hear them. And it's not necessarily always your job to fix the thing which is presented as a challenge.
Yeah. The best thing you can do in that moment might be just sit and listen and let them watch what they want to on telly that evening.
Maybe have a hug.
And it's just, but then there's going to be another occasion where it's actually maybe
we need an action plan.
Yeah, and there is something that we can do here, and you figure it out and take it forward.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Ed, the next episode of Breaking Bad is not going to fix this one. I've broken my leg.
We can binge whatever series you want.
Within reason.
Yeah.
I really want to understand, because I felt we've spoken a lot around maybe some of the more challenging scenarios or negativity that comes with that, and how you best moderate that, open floodgates in a structured approach.
Yeah.
But once you've gone down this road and people are learning, all right, I'm in that group for this and I get my information there, you still really need people to get involved.
Yeah.
And it will be great that they are able to maybe share grievances, connect on, that they've got new dogs, but essentially what brings a platform like this to life is people getting involved and creating content, sharing content. So with all this, and you've had this approach maybe for, what is it, 5 years?
Yeah, it's about 5 years.
4 or 5 years.
Something like that.
How are you still getting people to continually, get involved? What are some examples of where people are proactively sharing great content?
So I think there's kind of two complementary approaches. So when when we're kind of doing our set piece, sharing new stuff, yes, we'll get the chief executive to front that, and it'll be a post from him with his name and his face, or he'll do a video or something like that. But it's also about allowing, with all the best will in the world, he will front a lot of stuff, but he's not actually worked on all these projects and the stuff that we're delivering. So it's about encouraging, and in some cases doing, content for people.
Yeah.
So
basically, hand-holding is allowed.
Hand-holding is absolutely allowed.
Yeah.
And particularly if it's someone who has got a great story to tell, but they're just not, maybe they're a bit more introverted. Maybe they're just not,
haven't done it before.
Yeah. So actually, if we've got so as a housing association, we're also active kind of house builders, and so the last few years we've built between 400 and 500 houses a year.
Amazing.
And over the next couple of years, that's going to be scaling up to 1,000. So
wow.
that's significant investment in communities and stuff, and that's something that we want to talk about. So we'd get our chief exec and our development director and the senior people talking about the big pictures, and we're investing £100 million to do this and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But when we've got individual projects, we want the project manager, the person who's been doing the site inspections and stuff in the middle of the winter, with then knees literally in the mud in the middle of winter, overcome those problems to deliver it, so eventually people can move in and we can make a difference to people's lives again. So let's put them on a pedestal, celebrate them as a bit of a rock star, and so we'll help them. So it's like, well, sometimes so we will go and help. We will help them with a bit of photography or whatever it is, although done in an authentic way.
Yeah.
So we're probably
just make a suggestion.
We're not just going to get professional photographers in for everything. So so if other people see, it's just it was just Ed that shared that.
Yeah.
Then that means I can. So it's kind of giving permission without saying you have permission.
Yes.
And then it's also when it is pure user, so it's kind of fake user generated, but you're using that to create a bit of an atmosphere where people feel they can.
Yes, it's just a bit of momentum, isn't it?
And then when people do, champion it.
Yeah.
Make sure you're diving in, you're commenting, you're liking.
Yeah.
And we can create, so if someone does that, and then if it's just the comms team that pile in and they get, half a dozen likes very quickly, that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
So I'll do that again, won't I?
Yeah.
But also it helps because if they get a bit of that, then the algorithms and things don't work in the same way as external social. But all that stuff helps.
And it's just
if someone shares and
complementing.
it's just no one likes it, then it will disappear quite quickly.
And it's complementing those things, isn't it? Whether it's come from the organisation, the chief executive, and making sure maybe you've got some influencers in the business at hand to make sure you can complement that rather than just feeling like the same message all the time. So
it's a little bit like, I think, kind of when pre-digitization, when we may have brought whole organizations together for like the chief executive was sat on a stage with a couple, and they'd have kind of taken questions.
Yeah.
It's those people that you'd plant the questions with just to get things going.
Yes, so that other people feel more confident.
You can find a few
and
champions and things within the organisation. I think that's really important.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Ed. I've really enjoyed listening to you, and I think you've given us some things to think about that. Yeah, perhaps we haven't considered before. I mean, in no particular order. Like we started off talking about this idea that it doesn't have to be perfect to be great. And actually, what we're talking about there in terms of enabling some of your leaders and managers, I think the phrase you used was hand-holding's okay. A little bit of a gentle encouragement starts to achieve that level of momentum. But then as it pertains to this idea of moderation, we're sort of giving you some thought experiments of how you deal with particular types of conversations. But I respect the kind of challenge from you, which is that actually the most sustainable way to ensure that those challenges of moderation don't persist is to begin from a belief system or a philosophy of assumptive trust.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to live out those principles yourself first before launching any kind of platform, because ultimately it will be a reflection of the culture that you have rather than necessarily transform it.
Yeah.
And finally, though, I liked your idea, all of that being said, sometimes, things do happen and you do need to be able to address it. And leading with a kind of an empathy for what's happening in that group of individuals' worlds before deciding on how to respond is key. Because actually, when those things happen, they're not necessarily objections or business challenges so much as opportunities to engage in a constructive way.
Opportunity being the key word there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've got my closing question. Ready?
I don't know.
Which hat are you going? Which hat are you going to wear? I just want one top piece of advice for your peers in the same industry or similar, tackling something similar. What would you leave them with today?
This follows on directly from what Peter says. It's all about trust and authenticity. Trust your people. That starts with you. Trust your team, your people around you. If you feel like you need to be setting up 15 layers of approval for every single bit of content,
is that the right vibe?
Is it the right vibe? Because if that's what you're doing with your team, who are professional communicators, I talked earlier, my superpower's dyslexia. So if my team need me to check their spelling, punctuation and grammar, it's like they're better at that.
We won't start
so
there.
They can't. It's about setting a kind of an environment where we know we're going to talk about this next week, next month. We've got a bit of a plan. Let people get on with it.
Yeah. Love it.
They'll come if there are any issues. They'll come and tell me, and I'm really happy with that. And then that permeates out
naturally.
Well, I'd like to think it permeates out anyway.
And we are building a playlist for the year, which is all around, for comms gurus, survival playlist. Because let's be honest, music helps us feel vibes, whether we need hyping, whether we need some more emotional music that day. So yeah, it's an ultimate internal comms survival playlist. Ed, what is your track that you're going to be adding?
So I've got a video we released in mind.
Yeah.
I don't know the name of the track.
So it was a track to a video you had that was like, yes. So you're going to find out and
I'm going to
tell
find
me.
out and tell you. So that's rubbish for right now.
We'll put it in the show notes, don't worry.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Great.
But let me just explain kind of the context. So we're in the middle of going through a merger at the moment. We published a video that had this track on it, and we got some really interesting feedback. Some people loved it, and one of the questions was, it sounds like we're going to war.
Okay.
Going to war is not necessarily the vibe you want when you're trying to build one new organisation.
Yeah.
In fact, I would probably argue it's the opposite.
It's the precise opposite. And I think we went through different iterations of kind of the kind of the full track with the lyrics and everything, and then I'm pretty sure there's another version which has the lyrics taken off it. Anyway, we went for it. We published it.
Yeah.
And it was definitely still the right thing to do it, because it promoted conversation.
Well,
I can't wait to hear it. Talk about leaving the show on a cliff edge.
It's Kanye West.
Okay.
But that is as much as I can say.
That's as much as we've got, yeah.
Unless while we've been here, someone sent me what it was called.
And Ed, if somebody wants to follow you, learn from you, connect with you, where's the best place to find you?
I think the best place is probably you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Cool.
Edward Thomas.
I'm so sorry. We've been calling you Ed this
No,
whole time.
no, I'm
Okay,
Ed.
but for LinkedIn purposes, full
because
name.
my grandmother calls me Edward, I thought I'd better use that on LinkedIn.
Naturally.
Yeah. Formal on LinkedIn, party on the podcast.
Ed, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
I felt like we could have chatted for hours, and the time's gone so quickly. So thank you so much.
Loved it, Ed.
Brilliant.
Love listening and
Thank
learning
you.
from you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Very refreshing. Take care.